He discovered lands that changed history, but he never lived to see them. Betrayed by his own crew, abandoned in frozen waters, Henry Hudson vanished forever, leaving behind a mystery written on the map of the world. 300 years ago, England was rather poor in people and in money. Spain had become rich and important by her gold mines in the West Indies and the central parts of America. Portugal had been enriched by finding a way around Africa to India, where many things such as silks and spices were bought to be sold in Europe at high prices. Some thoughtful men in England had an idea that as the Portuguese had reached India by sailing round the eastern continent on the south, the English might find a way to sail to India around the northern part of Europe and Asia. By this means, the English ships would also be able to get the precious things to be found in the East. For this purpose, some London merchants founded the Muscovy Company, with old Sebastian Cabot at its head. This Muscovy Company had not succeeded in finding a way to China round the north of Europe, but in trying to do this, its ships had opened a valuable trade with Russia, or Muscovy as it was then called, which was a country but little known before. One of the founders of this Muscovy Company was a rich man named Henry Hudson. It is thought that he was the grandfather of Henry Hudson, the explorer. The merchants who made up this company were in the habit of sending out their sons, while they were boys, in the ships of the company to learn to sail vessels and to gain a knowledge of the languages and habits of trade in distant countries. Henry was sent to sea while a lad, and was no doubt taught by the ship captains all about sailing vessels. When he grew to be a man, he wished to make himself famous by finding a northern way to China. In the spring of 1607, almost 4 months after Captain Smith had left London with the colony bound for Jamestown, his friend Hudson was sent out by the Muscovy Company to try once more for a passage to China. He had only a little ship, which was named Hopewell, and he had but 10 men, including his own son, John Hudson. He found that there was no way to India by the North Pole, but he went farther north than any other man had gone. Hudson made an important discovery on this voyage. He found whales in the Arctic seas, and the Muscovy Company now fitted out whaling ships to catch them. The next year, the brave Hudson tried to pass between Spitsbergen and Nova Zembla, but he was again turned back by the walls of ice that fence in the frozen pole. By this time, the Muscovy Company was discouraged and gave up trying to get to India by going around the north of Europe. They thought it better to make money out of the whale fishery that Hudson had found. But in Holland, there was the Dutch East India Company, which sent ships round Africa to India. They had heard of the voyages of Hudson, who had got the name of the Bold Englishman. The Dutch company was afraid that the English, with Hudson's help, might find a nearer way by the north and so get the trade away from them. So they sent for the Bold Englishman and hired him to find this new route for them. Hudson left Amsterdam in 1609 in a yacht called the Half Moon. He sailed round Norway and found his old enemy, the ice, as bad as ever about Nova Zembla. Just before leaving home, Hudson had received a letter from his friend John Smith in Virginia, telling him that there was a strait leading into the Pacific Ocean to the north of Virginia. Hudson persuaded his men to turn about and sail with him to America to look for the way to India that Smith had written about. So they turned to the westward and sailed to Newfoundland and thence down the coast until they were opposite James River. Then Hudson turned north again and began to look for a gateway through this wild and unknown coast. He sailed into Delaware Bay, as ships do nowadays on their way to Philadelphia. Then he sailed out again and followed the shore till he came to the opening by which thousands of ships nowadays go into New York. He passed into New York Bay, where no vessel had ever been. He said it was a very good land to fall in with, and a pleasant land to see.
The New Jersey Indians swarmed about the ship, dressed in fur robes and feather mantles and wearing copper necklaces. Hudson thought some of the waterways about New York Harbor must lead into the Pacific Ocean. He sent men out in a boat to examine the bays and rivers. They declared that the land was as pleasant with grass and flowers as ever they had seen, and very sweet smells. But before they got back, some Indians attacked the boat and killed one man by shooting him with an arrow.
When the Indians came round the ship again, Hudson made 2 of them prisoners and dressed them up in red coats. The rest he drove away. As he sailed farther up from the sea, 28 dugout canoes filled with men, women, and children paddled about the ship. The white men traded with them, giving them trinkets for oysters and beans, but none were allowed to come aboard. As the ship sailed on up the river that we now call the Hudson, the 2 Indian prisoners saw themselves carried farther and farther from their home. One morning they jumped out of a porthole and swam ashore without even stopping to say goodbye. They stood on the bank and mocked the Man on the Half Moon as she sailed away up the river. Hudson's ship anchored again opposite the Catskill Mountains, and here he found some very friendly Indians who brought corn, pumpkins, and tobacco to sell to the crew. Still farther up the river, Hudson visited a tribe on shore and wondered at their great heaps of corn and beans. The chief lived in a round bark house. Captain Hudson was made to sit on a mat and eat from a red wooden bowl. The Indians wished him to stay all night. They broke their arrows and threw them into the fire to show their friendliness. Hudson found the river growing shallower. When he got near where Albany now stands, he sent a rowboat yet higher up. Then he concluded that this was not the way to the Pacific. He turned round and sailed down the river and then across the ocean to England. The Half Moon returned to Holland, and the Dutch sent out other ships to trade in the river which Hudson had found. In the course of time, they planted a colony where New York now stands. Captain Hudson did not try to go round the north of Europe anymore, but the next spring he sailed in an English ship to look for a way round the north side of the American continent. In this voyage, he discovered the great bay that is now called Hudson Bay. In this bay, he spent the winter. His men suffered from hunger and sickness. In the summer of 1611, after he had with tears in his eyes divided his last bread with his men, these wicked fellows put him into a boat with some sick sailors and cast them all adrift in the great bay. The men on the ship shot some birds for food, but in a fight with the Indians, some of the leaders in the plot against Hudson were killed. The seamen, as they sailed homeward, grew so weak from hunger that they had to sit down to steer the vessel. When at last Jewett, the mate who had put Hudson overboard, had himself died of hunger, and all the rest had lain down to despair to die, they were saved by meeting another ship. Explorer, one who travels to unknown countries to find out what they are. Dutch, belonging to Holland. Dugout canoes, boats made by hollowing out a log. Porthole, an opening in the side of a ship through which a cannon may be fired. Yacht, a kind of small vessel. Tell what you can remember about Hudson's attempt to get to China by going round the north of Europe. Tell of Hudson's discovery and exploration of the Hudson River, of Hudson's discovery of a great bay, of his death. Henry Hudson never found the passage he spent his life chasing. There was no triumphant return, no celebration, no reward. Instead, his journey ended in silence, lost to ice, darkness, and betrayal. Yet history did not forget him. His name was carved into rivers and seas, into maps that reshaped the future of North America. Trade routes followed his paths. Cities rose where his ships once sailed. Entire nations grew from the edges of his failed dream. Henry Hudson reminds us that exploration is never just about success,
Sometimes the greatest impact comes from those who push into the unknown and never come back. He died searching for a shortcut to the world, and in doing so, helped create a new one.